Hi, I'm Jeff Sachs. I'm director of the Earth Institute at Columbia University and also special advisor to United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on the Millennium Development Goals. And I'm absolutely delighted, really thrilled to help in the inauguration of the Giving What We Can initiative of students at Princeton and joined by students at Harvard and Rutgers, and I know something that will spread all over this country and I believe all over the world. The Giving What We Can initiative is exactly right because it's really asking about personal responsibility, and personal responsibility with regard to the world's problems is the core of leading a meaningful life oneself, and also the opportunity, of course, to participate in the great challenges and the great dramas of your generation. So I want to salute you. You're absolutely on the right track and a very creative track. When it comes to global poverty, this sense of personal responsibility, I think, is especially important. And that's because what we might call the paradox of extreme poverty in the 21st century. The world's rich. On average, the output per person around the world is now $10,000 when one measures that according to a system of common purchasing power. So there are 7 billion of us on the planet, each on average producing $10,000, meaning a $70 trillion world economy. Well, with such productivity, with such breakthroughs in modern times in areas of agricultural production, healthcare, information and communications technology, and countless other areas, it is really nearly a basic paradox, nearly inexplicable, that there are still around 1 billion people on the planet living in extreme poverty, meaning poverty that is so deep that survival itself, day to day, is a challenge. Survival is a challenge because those billion or so are chronically hungry. They don't get enough to eat. Their bodies suffer from long-term undernourishment of calories, of proteins, of fatty acids that they need, of micronutrients. They are struggling for survival because they don't have access to the most basic public health services. A bite of a mosquito still kills hundreds of thousands of children from malaria. Unsafe drinking water kills millions of diarrheal disease. Respiratory infections that could be cured by an antibiotic aren't cured by an antibiotic because there's no antibiotic around. There's no primary health care, and millions die. Overall, it's estimated that nearly 9 million children die every year under the age of 5 of conditions that are essentially utterly preventable, maybe by a vaccine or by having safe drinking water, by having an anti-malaria bed net, or are treatable. If they're not prevented in the first place, they can be cured by a medicine to treat malaria. After all, malaria is a 100% treatable disease using the artemisinin and combination drugs that are very inexpensive but simply don't reach the children who need them. So I regard this as the great paradox of our time, that nearly 9 million children are dying every year of not only preventable or treatable diseases, but preventable and treatable at a vanishingly small cost, almost sometimes just cents on the dollar. Or that people are hungry despite the fact that the technologies exist to double or triple or quadruple food productivity in the smallholder farms of sub-Saharan Africa and the other places in the world where farmers are getting such low yields that they can't even feed themselves and their families, much less feeding their communities and contributing to the larger economy. Now, I've been thinking about this issue for a long time, and I've had the honor to have several assignments for the United Nations, whether the World Health Organization or for Secretary General Kofi Annan in heading the Millennium Project to try to understand how to meet the Millennium Development Goals, or to be special advisor to United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on the Millennium Development Goals. So I more or less wake up in the morning and go to sleep in the evening thinking about what can be done to resolve this paradox of extreme poverty in a world of plenty. How can we end extreme poverty in our generation? Now, basically, the right way to answer such a question is to talk to people who know what they're doing. And as an economist, we don't necessarily know all that much except when we talk to the right people. When you talk to the malariologists, when you talk to the agronomists, when you talk to the specialists in neglected tropical disease, when you talk to the hydrologists, when you talk to the civil engineers. And I have been doing that with just incredible excitement to hear what their responses are. Because in one challenge after another of the lives of the extreme poor, what you learn is that there are utterly practical solutions. Usually there have been powerful demonstrations proving that those are solutions and that they operate at extremely low cost. I adored the fact when I was told a dozen years ago about long-lasting insecticide-treated bed nets being shown to be highly effective in reducing the malaria burden, and learning about how the artemisinin and combination therapies can cure those cases of malaria that occur despite the bed nets around, because bed nets are very important for reducing infections but can't eliminate infections on their own. And how thrilled I was to be taken by one of my colleagues out to the maize fields in Kenya. And Dr. Pedro Sanchez, one of the world's great economists, showed me on the leaf of this corn stalk, this maize plant, that it was yellow because of nitrogen deficiency. And what Dr. Sanchez showed me is if you put some fertilizer there, you end the nitrogen deficiency, and that same farmer doing what he's doing, or she is doing, because mostly a woman in these villages, could double or triple or quadruple their productivity, the amount of maize that they grow per hectare in a single planting season from one season to the next. And the more I talked, the more I learned that the paradox of extreme poverty is even more paradoxical than I might have guessed, because in a world of high technology and smart technology, we have such effective ways to help people to help themselves. I realized, of course, and here's where economics did come in, that what we were seeing essentially was a poverty trap, meaning that there are effective solutions that are permanent to help poor communities get out of extreme poverty. And very often the poor people themselves know about those solutions, but can't afford to implement them because their incomes are so meager that they need everything that they earn. And sometimes it's not money earning, sometimes it's just literally the food that they're producing in their little plot. They need that just to stay alive, so they don't have the means to make the investments for the next steps. That's a poverty trap. You know what to do. There are investments that could carry you out of poverty permanently, but you can't get that investment made because you're too poor to be able to carry it out on your own. Breaking the poverty trap becomes the great key. In my book, The End of Poverty, I called it the helping hand to help people get on the ladder of development by getting onto the first rung of the ladder. In other words, to have enough basics, high-yield seed, fertilizer, anti-malaria bed nets, antibiotics, community health workers, classrooms nearby, perhaps solar panels on the schools and on the clinics to provide some electricity. Now that can be expanded. Connectivity, now that we have broadband available even in very poor rural areas, using broadband for community health workers, for emergency services and so forth. I said if these basic things can be done in an integrated, smart manner, my word, for such a tiny amount of money, you can help communities not just to meet their basic needs, but to escape from poverty once and for all by raising their productivity and creating that virtuous cycle where they do have enough surplus to make the investment that raises their productivity further, which raises their income further, which raises their saving further on an ongoing cycle of development. Or if you like the metaphor of the ladder, get on the first rung, then you can climb up the ladder of development. Well, we've done a lot of costing, and this is where I come back to giving what we can. Turns out these effective interventions really are so low cost that if all of us in the high-income world, the United States and Europe and Japan and Korea and Singapore and Israel and other places that are in the developed economies, so-called, the high-income world, if we gave 1% of our income, even less than 1%, even 0.7%, which is a famous target for official development aid, that would be enough to enable comprehensive coverage of these hand-up core interventions that would sustainably enable the world's poorest places to get out of poverty. In other words, you invest for a few years, and then these communities can make their own way up the ladder of development. And the cost is so small, it is absolutely shocking. That's because the rich world really is so rich, though sometimes we don't feel it, but we are so rich, that even around 1% of our income, when put into the right kind of investments, can make a decisive breakthrough. Now, we decided to try to implement that idea in the Millennium Villages project. And the idea was actually empower communities across these core sectors, 5 of them: agriculture, health, education, basic infrastructure, and business development, to take the investments to escape from poverty on their own. And we said, look, it doesn't cost very much. It costs probably $60 to $80 per person per year in these impoverished villages to implement these hand-up technologies, not as a handout, not like food aid, but as a productivity enhancer that, if carried out over several years, can break the back of the poverty trap and let these villages free to move forward. It's amazing to watch what happens. Food production triples or quadruples because high-yield seed, fertilizer, low-cost irrigation, you put that together, and all of a sudden productivity goes from subsistence to market surplus that can be carried out for income. You take connectivity and give a mobile phone to a community health worker and give her a bag that has crucial things in it like oral rehydration solution and anti-malaria medicines and a rapid diagnostic test for malaria. And the community health worker goes household to household throughout the month and watches for sick children to hear about them, rushes over, does the rapid diagnostic test for malaria. If the child is infected, gives the protocol of this artemisinin combination therapy, I should say. And lo and behold, you have a local community worker, maybe with high school education, empowered by the latest technology, broadband in the villages, and using their smart mobile phone connected with SMS to an expert system, and the malaria burden can drop. Now people are having enough to eat. Now malaria is coming under control. At a low cost, the schools can be built and they can be equipped now with computers that obviate the need for a library of physical books and have a library of virtual books that all of a sudden brings literally, of course, thousands of volumes and magazines and news to impoverished communities that just a year or 2 or 3 years ago were essentially utterly isolated from the daily world information and from the kinds of information that could help to empower them to be more productive in the marketplace. shipments of grains, market prices in the markets, information about port services, weather forecasts, and so forth. So in the Millennium Villages, we're seeing a transformation. We're seeing death rates come down of young children, of mothers who used to die in childbirth but now have access to emergency obstetrical care. We're seeing children in school. We're seeing school meals programs in the school. We're seeing malaria burden come way down. We're seeing stunting of young children come down. We're seeing food productivity rising. We're seeing farmers diversifying from staple crops and cassava to high value added crops like onions in the Millennium Village in Senegal, and earning a real income now and being able to invest in irrigation, which gives them multiple crops throughout the year. Multi-cropping making a huge breakthrough out of what was subsistence or subsistence farming. So my answer to the question, what can we do? My answer to your initiative is you're exactly on the right track. A personal contribution of 1% of our income, if we generalize that, can make the difference to end extreme poverty in our generation. Well, it's your generation. I want to be part of that effort, and I believe that by the year 2025, this job can be done, even with all the obstacles that we face. That is because extreme poverty in a rich world is a paradox. And it's the paradox you can resolve by ending extreme poverty. I think the 1% solution really is the right approach. In truth, maybe 0.7% of income if properly applied, though I think that is for the official aid, and it used to be said private aid would be the 0.3 of 1%. Put them together, it's 1%. Now, here's the odd part. Just when we have the technologies to end extreme poverty, our political system has gone haywire. I've never seen actually such viciousness against the poor, America's poor as well as the world's poor, that we see from a significant part of Washington right now. They just say slash, slash, slash. They don't ask who's at the receiving end of those budget cuts. And they don't understand, quite the contrary, that if we really want a safe world, it's not by investing $800 billion, more than 5% of our GNP, in military approaches. That can never do it in places like Afghanistan or Somalia or Yemen. Hopeless. But if we invested a tiny fraction of that, if we invested 0.7 of 1% of our income, what would that be? That would be about $100 billion a year rather than $800 billion. Then we would be making a decisive breakthrough in making a safer world. But we don't reach anywhere close to that standard. The U.S. is spending maybe $30 billion a year on development aid total, $800 billion on military approaches, and we're seeing U.S. foreign policy failures one after another. But it comes back to giving what we can. Why? Because if our government isn't acting, it is a responsibility for us to take the lead on our own. And that's what you are doing, and that's why it is so wonderful what you're doing. It can't be purely individual, though each individual has the moral responsibility. It is social. It is a social movement. That's what you're doing. You're mobilizing. You're helping people to understand the meaning for themselves and for a safer world. You're getting communities together that weren't thinking about this to understand that breaking the poverty trap is within our grasp. And that's why I want to be with you, give you any support that I can. Where should you direct your time and effort? Help people to understand what they can do. Help them to take that 1% commitment. It could be in money, it could be in their personal time, it could be in their creativity, in their use of social networks, in interning in development sites, learning, thinking, innovating, providing even better solutions than the ones that we have right now. I, for one, love the holistic approach. That's why I've been so excited by the Millennium Villages project. I believe that by combining agriculture and health and education and basic infrastructure and solar power, safe water, microfinance, local agribusiness development, by putting all of those pieces together, we get farther than if we do a wonderful thing in one sector, one at a time, maybe water in this community and education in that one and healthcare. I think bringing them together really is great. So I would, of course, welcome you to join the Millennium Villages concept. I love it, and I think that it's right, and many countries are expanding it. I would invite you to look at these kinds of holistic approaches, where they're operating on the ground, check that what's happening is credible, that it's working, that it's being monitored, that it's being measured so that you know that money is being effectively used, it's reaching the people that need it. Ingenuity and creativity should be hallmarks of any effective intervention. But basically know that we can do it. We in the world can see the end of a scourge which has plagued humanity for as long as there's been humanity. Humanity was almost everywhere and at all times stuck in extreme poverty until the modern economic growth era, till modern technology. Now we're down, if you could say it, to 1 billion people or so. But that's 1 in 7, that's still about 15%, roughly 14 or 15% of the world's population. It's our generation's remarkable, unprecedented, historic opportunity to see the end of extreme poverty in our time. Thank you for taking on the challenge. Call on me at any moment in my capacity at the United Nations or at the Earth Institute or in the Millennium Villages to be a partner with your wonderful effort. It will spread, it will enliven the imaginations of students and our fellow citizens all over this country and the world. And it will be so rewarding personally as well as for the world that you will always know of the importance of what you are doing. Thank you so much for doing it, and thank you for letting me be part of this launch of this wonderful effort.